For if he were not expecting the fallen to rise again, it would have been useless and foolish to pray for them in death. But if he did this with a view to the splendid reward that awaits those who had gone to rest in godliness, it was a holy and pious thought. Thus he made atonement for all the dead, that they might be freed from their sin. My dear viewers, what I just read to you is coming from the second book of Maccabees, chapter 12, verses 44 to 46. If you know this passage very well, you understand that already I'm telling you we shall discuss that topic, purgatory. Purgatory, some say. Today, I want to look at the Catholic understanding of purgatory. Is purgatory biblical? Where is purgatory? Does it exist? My dear friends, for some few moments, even some few times, I have had many Catholics, even some non-Catholics, come to me, write to me, and ask, Father, could you explain a bit more on the understanding of purgatory? We want to do these few minutes we have. One, let me point out clearly that we must all know that life as we have on this earth has a beginning, and so it has an end. We are told that it is appointed unto man to die once, and after death, judgment. So we are also so sure that we shall die someday. We are also so sure that we shall be judged. There is judgment awaiting each and every one of us. Now, this is let's call the sequence of what happens when you die. When we die, we have what they call the particular judgment that follows immediately. It means that once you die on this earth, it is finished for you. You are already determined for heaven, or you are determined for hell. Because as you know, nothing happens after death. You can't buy your salvation after death. Whatever you can do for yourself now is today, now. Don't postpone anything. So when we die, by our life itself, we are put into either the heaven category or the hell category. No one is judging us. But because of your lifestyle, what you have done on earth, you're already positioned in one of these two, let me call it compartments, for want of a better word. Now, after this particular judgment, I call particular because your lifestyle will judge you already. So you call it particular, individual. It's what happens, the either going to heaven, or if the person has no sins in him or her, then it goes to heaven. She goes to heaven. He goes to heaven. But if the person has some sins in him, in her, then the person too could go to hell. Take it this way. You die, then judgment. The judgment will place you either in heaven, hell. But those who go to heaven are those who have no sins at all. So if you die in the state of grace, we call it, you have no sin. I mean, no sin. You die without even one single sin, straight to heaven. If you die with so many sins, then we go straight to hell, if you can say so. But the question is that, what about those of us who die? We have so many good things and some little sins in us. Would God put us together in the same category of those who have done evil? Answer the question. Do you think God will place somebody who has scored 90% in the same category of somebody who has scored 0%? Heaven is 100%. Hell is 0%. How are those who fall between 0 and 100? Where do they go to? This is a Catholic way of bringing in purgatory. You see it? So we have people who are perfect. In the Catholic Church, we call them saints. So when somebody is a saint, you believe that the person is 100% ready for heaven. He's in heaven. He's in heaven. You have those who, by their own lifestyle, have deprived God, have denied God, so straight to hell by their lifestyle. Then those of us who fall within heaven and hell, where do we go? The Catholics will say that we go to purgatory. But let me be quick to say that going to purgatory is not like a place that we go to. Because as you know, space is a matter of human understanding. With God, they stand like space. But we say it a place for the want to make us understand it. So, If you go to purgatory because you have sins in you, you have done many good things, what happens there? Purgatory as a word is taken from the Hebrew word Sheol. Sheol is translated into the Greek as Hades. I guess you have heard the word Hades before. It is same Sheol, Hades, that Latin translates as Purgatorium. So you have Sheol, Hebrew, you have Hades, Greek, you have Purgatorium, Latin, and then English, Purgatory. So Purgatory is coming from Sheol, coming from Hades, coming from Purgatorium, and now Purgatory in English. The word purgatory, to purge, means to be purified, to be cleansed. So in purgatory, we don't go there to get something, but just to be purified, to be cleansed. To be cleansed of what? To be purified of what? Of the little sin that is left in you. But not sin in the same way as you doing something wrong. Before we can understand this, let us understand what we call guilt and sin. Punishment. You see, my dear friends, when King David, in 2 Kings chapter 12, verses 13 to 14, was told by Nathan, listen, I have sinned against the Lord, he replied. Nathan answered David, the Lord on his part has forgiven your sin. You shall not die. But since you have utterly spurned the Lord by this deed, the child born to you must surely die. There are two things in there. David sinned and asked God for forgiveness, so he was forgiven. But the punishment of that sin still must happen, so the child must die. When you sin and say, God, forgive me, God will forgive you. But the punishment for that sin, you must go through it. That's why when people go to confession, Catholics, they are given what they call the penance. They go and confess their sin to the priest in the presence of God, and then God forgives them. They are given penance. The penance become what they do to take away that punishment that comes with the sin. So David sinned, he asked for forgiveness, and yet he had to pay the price of that, the punishment. So those of us who sin, and we don't pay the price, the punishment, and we leave it like that, that's what happens in purgatory. Purgatory takes care of the punishment that is due to your sin, not the guilt itself, which has been forgiven. Oh, okay, let's make it this way, make it much easier. If you happen to steal my shirt, and then you come to me, Father, I have stolen your shirt. I have forgiven you, but you must return the shirt. You don't keep it. You see, you must return the shirt. That's what happens that's what I mean by the punishment, the atonement, or reparation for the sin. You sin, you are forgiven, but you have to return it back. Restitution. So it is that returning, reparation, atonement that we call purgatory. You go into purgatory to take care of that. So you have people who have died and they committed mortal sins. I guess you know mortal sin is we call deadly sin. You have venial sin, we call them not deadly sin. 1 John chapter 5, 16, 17, read about that. It talks about that there are kinds of sin. You have deadly sins, you have less deadly sins, you know. So not all sins are equal. Some sins are bigger than others. It's not carrying imagination. Go and read 1 John chapter 5, 16 to 17. So if you commit a mortal sin, it means that you are out of the system. But when you go for confession, you are forgiven. But the punishment must follow. So if you are dying, and you know that you have committed a sin, and you are not, so to say, atoned for that sin, apart from forgiveness, purgatory will take care of that. It's the same thing for those who might have died in venial sins. You have some venial sins. Oh, I said, oh, you get away, you foolish, and all those small things we call them, you still end up in purgatory. And that's supposed to take off of the purification. Why? Why? Because Revelation chapter 21, verses 27 says, nothing unclean shall see God or enter heaven. Because heaven is for 100% holiness. Because God himself is holy, 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 we are told. You see, 3 times holy, perfect holiness. So if you are not 100% holy, you can't see heaven. So because of that, because if you have done so much, you still have some sins, you can't go there. So purgatory will take care of that. Then you are cleansed, and then you move on to heaven. What we know is that if all those in purgatory are people who died in a state of grace, so they died in a state of grace, meaning that they died in a good communication with God. Yet, because of their mortal sin they committed and they didn't atone for them, they didn't pay back for that, or because the venial sin they have committed, that's why they go there. So purgatory is not a place for people who are condemned to hell. No. It follows then that all those in purgatory will someday end up in heaven. No soul remains in purgatory forever because they are just there for purification, you know. So that is how we go about and we talk about when we say purgatory. Now let me give you some biblical references. Already I've mentioned 2 Maccabees chapter, the one I started with, 2 Maccabees chapter 12, verses 44 to 46. You can look at that. You know, this man praying for the dead, so that the atonement of their sins will be taken away, so they can end up in heaven. But what we usually say for purgatory is found in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 12 to 15. Please read it. Paul talks about two kinds of people who build on the foundation of Christ. Some build on it with gold, silver, and precious stone. And others, they build on it with hay, with straw, and with wood. And then he goes on to say that, look, those who build on those straw, hay, and wood will burn up because you have to go through fire. The question is that, who are those people who build imperfectly on God's foundation? They are talking about those of us who are not so perfect, but we still love Jesus. We still want to be with him. In purgatory, hell, the fire of purgatory will burn every trace of sin in us so that we can see God as he really is. You can also look at 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 18 to 20. Please read 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 6. And then you can also look at Matthew chapter 12, verses 32. These scripture passages help you understand purgatory. So let me just end by saying that purgatory is only the word we give to people between not heaven, not hell. The Jews themselves, they did that. Jesus was a Jew. He prayed for the dead. Paul, who wrote the letters, was also a Catholic, a Jew himself. He also prayed for the dead. We know that by tradition, the belief in purgatory had been there always, from the very beginnings. So the early Christians all believe in that. It was something that Catholic Church brought into the system. There was something there already from the beginning. I'll end by saying that purgatory is a place for people who hope to be in heaven someday. So that's why we are supposed to pray for them. They can't pray for themselves because once you die, it's finished for you. But our prayers can add to take away those little sin traces from them. May we pray for our dead who are lying in purgatory, are waiting for God to consume them into heaven glory. And know that God himself, once he makes you go through this life, even with challenges, is so merciful. You find your way with him someday in heaven. God bless you.